you think that, like, if I really tried, like if I really worked hard and I put in the effort and I lifted the weights and I benched, over 200 pounds, I did the squats, I did it all, that I could have been a contender?
No.
That I could have been somebody?
No.
I guess in what capacity?
No. The answer is no. The answer is no in any capacity.
It all ties in
Featherweight is a thing.
to a movie called On the Waterfront.
It's important to this one.
Directed by Tattletale Elia Kazan.
Yeah.
Who you telling?
He was one of the blacklist Hollywood directors that when the government was like, all the commies in Hollywood, name your friends.
Names.
He named names.
And were they really communists? I don't know.
Probably not. Just
and got him in trouble?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. He was
he
booed at the Oscars.
Yeah. Hollywood hated him.
Welcome to the Chronic Canon. I'm Jesse.
I'm Frank.
I'm Brandon.
This is a podcast in which the three of us run down a movie of our choosing. In this particular series, we are covering the films of Martin Scorsese. And the particular film that we are covering today is Raging Bull.
Raging Bull.
Martin Scorsese's classic boxing pseudo-Christian epic.
Yeah.
What?
Epic, if you'll call it that. And we get very high, not just while we talk to you, but while we watch the films. In this particular case, we will discuss how that can be a problem sometimes. But sometimes it can make for a transcendent experience, and we think that talking about these movies in tandem with that weed element, if you will, brings a whole new perspective to movies that people don't seem to talk about in conjunction very often. So that's the niche. We are smoking movies, we're talking weed, we're live in our ears, but not in yours. And if you don't like heat,
get the fuck out.
Leave right now. Within
We
30
already
seconds
talked
flat
about
of
this.
when I said it. Okay?
We already talked about this. Just got to rattle them off. Then you got to let them slide in.
If
One
you
by one.
haven't seen Heat, that's fine.
But
It's
go
just-
see it immediately. Make that a priority.
Probably turn this off.
Mhm.
Watch Heat. Have you watched Raging Bull? Should probably also watch that. This is a lot of spoilers.
What is the Chronic Canon again? What we don't even know, honestly. We're still figuring it out.
There are
but
movies in there.
we are
Okay?
slowly building our own Chronic Canon. And, we'd like you to build your own, too.
Yeah.
So listen along with us, and then if you want to, you can email us at thechroniccanon@gmail.com. And at that point, you can recommend us films to talk about that you'd want in your Chronic Canon, see if we'd put them in our Chronic Canon.
Yeah.
And just because we have this podcast, does that mean that our Chronic Canon is the Chronic
All right,
Canon?
get off this.
I don't know. Is the monolith real?
Yes.
No.
Was there more than one assassin in the Kennedy thing?
Is she on the island by herself? Are we
Who
asking questions
knows?
about movies?
But here's the
No,
deal.
real life.
Elia Kazan on the waterfront. Oh, also, if you're a first-time listener, welcome.
Dude, I
feel like Raging Bull is a movie that somebody might click on first.
People know
welcome.
this one.
People do know this one. This is definitely a greatest hit, if you will, in Scorsese's filmography.
I think it's generally considered to be his magnum opus, which is kind of crazy to me.
kind of fucked up.
I wanted
I
to
get
ask, and spoilers, we already mentioned that'll happen,
Yeah.
but we're going hardcore, like right off the jump, so if you haven't seen Raging Bull, leave now. The very end, the monologue, on the waterfront monologue,
Yeah.
to me, I'd assume that means that there's a lineage that you can trace back to that film as an influence, and I mean, obviously, De Niro's commitment to the role of Jake LaMotta, very similar to the way Brando would have tackled the part in the day. To that point, because I've seen On the Waterfront only once, and it was years and years ago, and I know it's one of your favorite films, Frank. I'm
Right.
Jesse.
I'm Frank.
Brandon.
And I just wanted you to tell me if there was any sort of connection that you saw between the two, or if there was any purpose for using that monologue and kind of getting the past out of the way before we get to 1980.
I have seen it once, and it was a long time ago. I just remember my feelings that are very fond of it. I do not remember much of that movie.
I apologize for bringing it up.
It's fine. I mean, the whole plot of the movie definitely relates. It does. I know that much. He's a guy who was forced out of boxing because of the mob, and then he lost his shot at the title.
Yeah.
Because he didn't go his way. He decided to follow the thread. So Jake LaMotta is the opposite of that. He fights against the mob to go. Oh, but he does. I forget. He does work with the mob at that one point. So it's that, and then rising to the top and falling, and also a whole dramatic thing with your brother. Blaming your brother. That's an On the Waterfront too. So they're definitely similar movies.
Okay.
I remember enough. I'm sorry.
No, no, you don't have to be
I just
sorry.
don't remember fucking details. I just know that Brando's sick, and the whole movie was like, this is dope.
I remember nothing other than I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
And I remember
Lee J. Cobb, right?
Yeah,
he's
and
great.
there's a priest who gives a good speech at the.
But the priest is played by
docks.
somebody important too.
Fuck,
I know he is.
totally.
I fucking can't remember for the life of me off the top who it is, but I know I'm gonna kick myself in the ass the moment you tell
Were
me.
you gonna Carl Malden?
Carl Malden. But what were you gonna ask me?
Yeah.
Were you? He's an actor.
In case you didn't know, Brandon is not as in the know on movies as Frank and I.
Oh.
If you're a first-time listener.
I guess you throw him under the bus.
Well, that's a
Who'da-
point that we got to
I
get
know.
out there. We just got to be blunt. Let's be blunt, okay?
Who'd
be
have
blunt.
thought? For the record, I saw a correlation between the movie that I watched and On the Waterfront. So,
What
how's
movie?
that? The movie that we were supposed to watch.
Raging Bull?
Yeah.
We did watch it.
Yeah.
You've seen On the Waterfront?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. This is a hot take on the Chronic Canon.
I love boxing movies.
Wait a
you
minute.
Jag?
Are you fucking doing a bit?
Now, the part...
This
Why
is a
can't I
bit.
just speak?
You just got me
Why
excited.
can't I just speak to you about movies without you thinking I'm doing a goddamn
No,
bit?
I think you're doing a goddamn bit.
I ain't doing the goddamn bit. I'm just saying the part where he's running up the stairs and the music is playing. I knew. I was like, this is just like that part on the waterfront.
I hate you.
Also, I know we ain't talking about our favorite parts of the movie yet, but personally, when he goes, Adrian, I lose it. I'm like, this is really. I didn't know Scorsese and Sylvester Stallone worked so closely together.
Dude, okay, so remember how we talked about the reason Scorsese's movies fucking fail when they fail is because he just drags everything out to the point where it's just dead?
No, I thought we said that that's how you hit the nail on the head. You
All
know?
right, I fucking give up.
The Chronic Canon. I'm Frank.
I'm Jesse.
I'm Brandon.
And this is what this episode's gonna be like, I guess.
Fucking raging bull.
Look,
You
let's
fuck
just
my wife.
let's just put it all on the fucking
You're
table.
sick.
Let's put it on the table. Let's be blunt.
Let's
just
be blunt. Let's be blunt.
We recorded last week's episode in 2 chunks.
Yep.
And now we're riding immediately off that slap happy wave after doing the second half of New York, New York. Maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't.
Yeah.
I hope not.
I
I'm
hope not,
jazzed to
too.
get to King of Comedy after this.
Yeah.
Jazz.
Oh yeah, we're gonna watch that next. It's been a
It's
long
a big day. Big,
big
day
day.
for the Chronic Canon office.
So we fucking
Sorry, that was
this is what it's
immature.
gonna be. You reference the fact that sometimes the being high for movies isn't exactly
The best?
if you maybe go too far. So we
Well,
should
you know
talk
what?
about
This is actually, and I don't know if it was the time or a movie before this. I mean, there's been bad movies in the canon of Scorsese thus far,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we've talked about specifically how there are some movies that I think smoking weed can inhibit the
I
experience.
think we mentioned that in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Maybe.
I'm not positive.
Me
because
either.
I think that's one I felt that way. It would be better sober.
And I almost felt that way about New York, New York as well.
I disagree.
Being high definitely helped for the end.
But I do think, just to put it out there, like really thinking about it, Raging Bull, stone sober, if you really want to do it right.
I don't know. We had a friend arrive last week, so that's why we had to do New York, New York in 2 parts. So
Yes.
shout out to Nick, who watched Raging Bull with us,
Mm-hmm.
and he brought the dankage. It was strong, very, very strong.
It's always strong with Nick. Nick,
Put a brother in a
just
headlock.
in case you're listening, thank you. We
Yeah.
love you.
Fucking-
You just come through and supply us with
Shut
the
up.
greatest things that we've ever received, and you're a great friend.
He'll
and we love you.
be on eventually. But
Shout out to Nick,
the
friend
thing
of the
is,
podcast. Pots.
podcast.
it's very nice of him to do that
Yes.
and join us. But also, he got us fucked up.
Nick's Nax.
We were
Plug.
cracking up right before starting this movie. The vibe was wrong.
Oh, we were talking about the other guys. That was like the
Like
the movie that
laughing.
was discussed just before hitting play on Raging Bull.
So we're trying to get in the zone, and of course, this movie is nothing like the other guys, even a little bit.
No,
Not
And-
even a bit though.
Somehow, I found myself getting
there's a lot of yelling in both movies.
There is a lot of yelling in both movies.
Sure.
I found myself, and they're both hilarious. Now to think about it.
My life isn't a tragedy; it's a comedy.
Oh Jesus Christ! Get that out of here. Listen. From one best
Joaquin?
actor to another,
The guac.
Raging
What?
Bull into Joker.
Yeah.
Both win best actors.
Oh shit!
Both winning. Both winning.
Both swims.
Yikes.
Best
That's
actors.
history. That's history
Sure.
right there. You understand?
This is awful. We were too high, and I found myself just getting higher as the movie went, and it almost felt like I needed an edible. So I found this experience to be a lot.
It was a lot.
It's a lot high, but I think it's
And
worth
you know,
it.
Raging Bull is a movie that I have not seen other than one time.
Same here.
Like, probably when I was like 13
Same here.
for the first time. I remember being on the phone with Frank just before starting it for the first time too, and after to discuss it. But
See, I don't remember that, but I believe it wholeheartedly.
I remember at the time really liking it, thinking it was great, but it never left a huge impression, even at the time. It was never a movie that was talked about very much between Frank and I, between me and other friends of mine that liked movies. So it didn't resonate. It never was something I felt the urge to come back to. And then I think now is, I suppose, an apropos time to bring it up, that watching it this time, I saw some ties to The Irishman And I think that getting into The Irishman last year was sort of the gateway into wanting to explore more of Scorsese's career and look at him more analytically. And I think that in this film particularly, you can really see him reckoning with similar dark themes and even surrounding not just death, but like the point of life in general, and how you can waste that in both this film and that film. And he does it in a very similar way. But I'll get into the specifics as to why maybe later. So going into it this time and having seen The Irishman so recently and everyone talking up Raging Bull the way they do, because obviously if you're listening to this and know anything about movies, Raging Bull is, considered one of the greats. A lot of people probably consider it to be his best. So I had high hopes going into this rewatch that it would strike a chord with me in a way that it hadn't before and might reach the top tier of my Scorsese list. And I was surprised that it did not peak over the rating that I'd originally given it, which granted 4 out of 5 for the record.
We're just out here.
Yeah, it's not the Scorsese that speaks to me in the way that, Irishman or Taxi Driver does, and et cetera. We'll talk about more as we go down the line. But I think that this is almost a cool precursor to The Irishman. Like, it would be interesting watching those two back to back, Raging Bull with this, because I think that that's the violent, crazy, chaotic film versus the very quiet, somber experience that, while still violent and brutal at times, is very sparse in that use. But this movie, I think the silent moments are that much more poignant because of the fact that it's so loud throughout. But anyway, I'll close out my tangent there for now, because I think that you had a subject you wanted to discuss.
I think you could argue that there's multiple movies in his filmography that could be put up with The Irishman. And that's why it is so affecting, because it is the culminating piece. Because it's not just Raging Bull. Goodfellas,
it's everything.
Mean Streets, they're all very similar.
Your theory before that it was Mean Streets leading into
Goodfellas
leading into
Irishman.
I think that this certainly fits into that direct lineage if you're calling out specific movies.
It's the introduction of Pesci to the squad.
And he fits in immediately.
Yeah.
And I think that you had said it at some point while we were watching, but I think that you said you liked his performance better than De Niro here?
I think until the last half hour, yes.
Okay.
I think De Niro's obviously amazing, but I think Pesci was impressing me more than I ever expected, and really underrated him in memory for this performance.
Same. I never remembered his character very well.
Yeah, but that last half hour, De Niro fucking takes it up to the next echelon of acting. I think they're both pretty great.
Man, this movie was hard to watch.
We've brought it up a bit, but this is a very brutal experience, wall to wall. I think the only moment that you could even call, quote, nice is maybe the intro, just in that it is objectively gorgeous. The cinematography, the slow motion, the score underneath, De Niro's movements, the physicality in his performance in this is just fucking unbelievable. Just watching his body move throughout the entire film, not just in the incredible boxing scenes, but in just his every single movement is very specific.
His physicality definitely carries through the whole thing, where you get the idea of his presence is intimidating.
Yes.
Always. 100% of the time.
Well, you said it pretty quick that he's an animal.
Yeah. And then they literally said
animal.
it in the movie.
And then they actually, you know what? They don't stop.
They don't stop. Which is a whole part of his flaw or his psychology, whatever, is he's literally told he's an animal.
He's a raging bull, if you will.
Hey, fucking heyo.
Said that too many times throughout the movie.
Honestly, though.
But they give you too many opportunities.
So I guess the thing I want to talk about out the gate, kind of this, what we're circling around right now anyway, about De Niro and his animalistic nature and his not so good qualities that are definitely present throughout the whole thing. And we talked about this a lot, especially the last 2 episodes, but I mean this whole time since good old JR and Who's That Knockin'. Almost every male protagonist in Scorsese's films so far have been some variation of the same kind of asshole with some different driving force.
Yeah.
This is probably the most extreme and obvious of those assholes. And it made me start to wonder, because Brandon, you have discussed many times on mic as well that you don't enjoy watching movies with people you don't like, and that is
or following people you don't like, rather,
and that
as
is
the protagonist
predominantly what he does here in all his movies,
at least up to this point too, because Alice doesn't live here anymore and Boxcar Bertha are really the only exceptions to that rule.
Right.
We're following pretty shitty people otherwise.
And don't get me wrong, Bertha and Alice aren't great people.
No.
But they don't compare to the male protagonists that we've seen.
No.
The males in those movies
don't compare to them either.
You're right. They compare more to these
and
guys.
Alice doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying they're terrible.
Oh,
the
okay.
men are always presented terrible.
Sorry, definitely misunderstood.
I misworded. It's fine.
We're all high. That's the point. That's the problem.
This is where weed comes in, everyone. Anyway.
It's a podcast after all.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. And hopefully you're high too. And if not, that's okay though.
Yeah,
You don't have to.
if you're not high and don't like weed, you can stay. But if you don't like heat, you gotta go.
The thing that is required to smoke weed, heat, is the only thing that you need to like to be here.
It's like a badge. You gotta flash it.
Yeah.
You see
That's
heat?
weird. So, what do you guys perceive as the value in this, or devalue of this?
Watching movies with
protagonists
immoral
like this.
protagonists.
Immoral, like almost objectively bad people. Borderline objectively bad people.
Well, in these cases, definitely bad people.
This guy in particular, because he's real. Jake LaMotta's real. That's another layer that's new here, is that it's based on a real person who, by all accounts, is just as terrible as depicted.
And was
By
very
his own accounts,
very
is just as
active,
terrible.
very active in the making of the movie as well. Apparently, and the bit of trivia that I read leading up to this was that when LaMotta saw the movie for the first time, he realized how horrible of a person he'd been his whole life. And in talking to Vicky LaMotta, his ex-wife, said, "Was I really that bad?" And she said, "You were worse."
And if you guys have seen Raging Bull, the weight of that statement kind of like barrels down on you.
So rough.
Yeah. That is rough.
Because this movie is about as dour as you can get. Like it's just in the dumps.
You feel like you're in the
depressing.
ring. I felt like I was in the ring.
And that's intentional.
I felt every fucking blow of this movie.
We'll get there.
It hurt. But in terms of what you were saying, Frank, this has literally been my problem with like a lot of films in general, especially as we're moving through Scorsese, is I'm trying to like grapple with that myself because I don't like this person and it's harder for me to connect, and I start to feel vindictive because I'm watching this person and it's like, this is the person we're watching. Like they can't die in the first scene. Like they have to live and I have to watch their journey. That pisses me off. But then it's almost every time after the fact where I can sort of like take in like the messages and like, you know, what certain movies are going for. Even Raging Bull, it took maybe a couple of days after and a couple of discussions for me to be like, all right, this is definitely the themes that are playing here. It is the rise and fall of a person, and him being real definitely helped me process the movie a little bit better. But even, you know, talking about Taxi Driver, a movie that I did not like as soon as it ended, and even in the days following, had just like this resentment for it, and resentment for like society for loving it so much, for like what I saw as just like an homage to being like a shithead. But I think that the value of these movies is if you can take a step back from what you're physically seeing and sort of look at what's behind the lens. I think there is some real value in terms of like not being like that and not perpetuating the things that you see these people perpetuate. I think if you can look at them more as a lesson as opposed to just watching it like a movie, like you should not watch Taxi Driver or Raging Bull the same way you're watching the Transformers series. I don't think that this is a casual viewing that's fun for you and your friends. I think that movies like these need to be presented in a more educational manner, and unfortunately that's just not how like movies and cinema work these days. What do you guys think?
At least not always.
Do you think that there should be a distinct, obviously they can cross, but do you think there should try to be a distinction between art and entertainment?
Yeah,
Like
tough
obviously
question,
you can
man.
be entertained by art, and entertainment can be artistic.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the point of misconstruing something. And then there's always the debate of what's intention and what are we perceiving, because that's what we want to perceive.
Right.
What if Martin Scorsese, we know there's enough documentation and we know we've seen enough footage and enough movies, we have a full context.
Yeah.
But what if Martin Scorsese loved Jake LaMotta and was like, this guy was robbed of a better life that he should have had, you know? That would color it weird to know that, but they're in a way
I think at that point it's a different movie though.
You're right. And then is that us because we're trained to watching movies and we're talking about them in this way? Or is that every movie?
I don't know. I think that I guess to your
I'm asking the impossible.
to your earlier point, like what Brandon said, I think was kind of key in that, like, at least in my head, it's like, these are educational tools, and that like even in myself, like in the last few years, just trying to grow as a human being and as a person, and especially as a man particularly, and like, you know, trying to let go of a lot of those toxic traits that lie within most American men just intrinsically by being a part of this society. Seeing these things in film and confronting them in a proactive way can be, like Brandon was saying, an educational tool in a like inadvertent way, but on top of of that. It can help you reckon with things within yourself. Like movies just are an exaggerated form of a lot of different emotions that people can tap into. Like we had talked about, I believe in a previous episode, Frank Sheeran is an irreparable person.
Yeah.
But I think by design, Scorsese is trying to pump some sympathy into the movie to get the audience to latch on in that way, to try and
empathy.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's tough only because it varies person to person and how people perceive the film and how people want to view film. It's just like you said, and I guess that's the thing, is dependent on what the majority leans toward is maybe where the problem could ultimately lie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you could always make the arguments like...
But I also think that kind of to the point that we talked about when we talked about the value of crime movies or what attracts us to the crime movie, I think you can even call back to what I had said before about it's foreign to a degree as well, like especially in a movie like Raging Bull where Jake LaMotta is such a unique, and like I've never met a single person that I would be like, oh, that person reminds me of Jake LaMotta. No, they're pretty in like singular forces in this world, it seems. That's probably why movies are made about them.
But there could be a danger in that, in the idea of like, what is a lesson if it's not perceived that way,
right?
And also by nature of being something that's created and in a limited time, there is an inherent simplification always to what is being portrayed.
Yes, right.
And that too can be not always great when trying to learn. Even documentaries that are literal fact, or supposed to be literal facts, sometimes you can't fit every piece of information about everything into a documentary.
Very true.
Key
pieces
a limit.
Can be left out.
Just even more stuff to throw in the pot, I guess, of just like, how do we defend these? I don't know. Like,
well,
I
think
like
if anything, that's the purpose of things like this podcast. It's to talk about them in this way and get the word out in this way. But I mean, like, I guess this is not necessarily the best example to talk about, because I'm thinking about Raging Bull more or less being like, I don't know if people could watch this movie and perceive it like it's not glorifying, because I think that's too big a word for what I'm trying to say here, but like glorifying Jake LaMotta's actions or his behavior or trying to normalize it. Because I think that's another thing that at least is important to me in like my watching of films and my understanding of films and my understanding of life and the people that are around me in life, those that I know and those that I don't, but the humanity and all of the people, including Jake LaMotta, and like examining that for what it is and trying to trace the history and seeing how, like, repeating like that old adage of teaching about the past so we don't repeat the tragedies, that we learn from the tragedies of the past and we move forward and we never cover that again. And the only way we can do that is if we remember and if we look back and if we teach. So I think if that's the argument, then it's just like we have to do the work as the people that have the knowledge of, hey, this movie is out here to show life from a different perspective, and being able to maybe even in some way learn to understand why that perspective is the way it is. Because I think that was also why we talk about villains in movies. The ones that are the best are the ones that we can understand their methodology or, their modus operandi. And in some cases, the villains that don't have any reason at all, like, or that are just agents of chaos or evil, or just
scarier.
Michael Myers and things like that. The Joker, Dark Knight more specifically. I haven't seen the new Joker, if that wasn't already clear. But yeah, I think that's that really.
Last thing about this subject.
Forever.
And then we're never, ever talking about it again. No. But,
you good?
Yeah, it was funny.
Okay.
But I think Raging Bull isn't necessarily the best movie to have made this argument with, because I think this one's a little more obvious than even New York, and Taxi Driver. I think those could more easily be perceived as like, well, are you on this guy's side because it's so from his perspective? But more than that, it's like they're more ambiguous in their motivations and their actions even.
Yeah.
But Jake LaMotta is almost undeniably like this chaotic force of nature that is an animal, of course. So, I don't know.
I think it's Scorsese in a way reckoning with the most intense emotions within himself. De Niro, same thing. And they're projecting it through a perspective that is very foreign to them. Like Scorsese himself even said that boxing is a subject that would never interest him. A sports movie is a movie that would never interest him.
He literally says anything with a ball is stupid.
It took him so long, according to history, that for De Niro to convince Scorsese to do the film, which I guess now is a good time to mention. This was a project that De Niro had pitched to Scorsese, and I believe this is the first of only two in Scorsese's entire career
That I know of.
that I know of. If I read it in another,
We'll talk about it then.
article or something when the movie comes along the pike, we'll talk about it then. But I'm pretty sure it's this and another film, and we'll definitely talk about that other film later. But
Spoilers, there's Irishman.
all right, well, if you want to just call a spade, yes.
Call a spade. Remember? Let's be blunt.
Yeah, let's be blunt.
be
The
honest.
Irishman.
I lied. I have one more thing. I swear to God. I thought this is the thing I wanted to talk about first and forgot.
Please do.
And just like it just came back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Do we agree that art has to, from some perspective, be an extension of the artist? Yes? Like you're connecting to it in some way, right?
I think
no matter
that
what.
aids in the earnestness and the honesty on screen.
I
Right.
don't believe in separating the art from the artist. No.
And I think that truth is art if it can be achieved, but art is a lie. So
Okay. Well, whatever. That's not what we're talking
Thank
about.
you, Jesse.
It's some extension no matter what. And a thing I sometimes think about, because I felt that in things I've tried to make, it's almost like a reminder and or fears. And I think people do that most clearly with horror movies, right? That's obvious.
Oh, yeah.
What am I afraid of? But Scorsese's movies remind me or make me feel this way, especially. It's like the fear of, I understand this and it scares me. Is there so much of a difference from Jake LaMotta than anybody else on that path of stardom and fame and success and living in their own chaotic world?
yeah.
Like, this shittiness isn't only attributed to boxers.
No.
There have been other people in history, usually men, who act this way too on their quest to success, which this ultimately is.
Absolutely.
And then the fall that usually accompanies that. It's a typical arc and narrative. And then I think there's a fear of that when you start to taste that success. Obviously, I'm hypothesizing because none of us have ever come close to anything of that level.
Yeah.
Even remotely.
No.
But you see it over and over.
Yeah.
So is there value in that's why we make the movies?
No.
Like as a warning more than a lesson.
It's crazy you mentioned that because earlier when Jesse was making his point, I was thinking about when he was talking about how foreign it is because we don't know people that are like Jake LaMotta.
Or at least that intense.
yeah,
You can maybe trace
yes.
like, oh, people have similar quirks or similar attributes.
Yeah. What that led me to think about what maybe is scary, also I guess good in terms of like a lesson, is the familiarity within the foreignness.
Oh yeah.
The times where Jake LaMotta gets pissed or Jake LaMotta is insecure and you're like, fuck, like I've been there. And then you see him take it 10,000 steps further than you ever would.
Yeah.
And that's what sort of snaps you back and you're like, I ain't been there.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to recognize, like, I don't feel good about what I'm watching because I kind of relate to it in a sense. And then being able to turn that into, well, I know that that's not how I want to be. And maybe it's upsetting to, like, continue to look at that, to absorb.
Well, no, I've said that that's part of the reason why I think some people, especially those who are less willing to look at film in this way, have a hard time with movies like this sometimes because they don't like confronting elements of themselves like that or feeling that feeling and seeing the bad in it and being able to connect and relate. That can be very uncomfortable. Like, I know I've been there before. I'm sure we all have to a certain
I
degree.
was gonna, can I say two things? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, you're good.
One being that just because you aren't connecting doesn't mean one way or the other it's a good movie or a bad movie. Even in that connection, it can still be
Yeah.
a bad movie, right? That doesn't
Yeah.
dictate a quality to it.
Yeah.
We're not saying that. It's just a perspective that could be there, right?
Yeah, right.
Sure.
And I wanted to own up two very specific examples. 8.5 and Synecdoche, New York are two movies I hated first time I saw them. And I think, Jesse, you even said to me, I'm Frank.
I'm Jesse.
Brandon.
Yeah. That you were like, you should watch those again, like a couple years down the road. And they're two of my favorite movies.
I don't know if I said that about 8.5, but certainly
It was
Synecdoche.
8.5 too.
Really?
Yes, I'm
Wow.
positive. It was the thing of once I was older, more willing to be honest, and we're still always working on it. It was like I think I was literally scared of this. And
Yeah.
now I just understand it. And it's like, right, fine.
Yeah.
Good.
I think that helps you to get the reins on it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of
easier
the
to
reason why
grapple with.
movies are valuable in that sense. Because if that is the
Connectivity.
gateway that made you get to that point, what's wrong with that?
Nothing. And just
great.
because none of us have, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, none of us have demons that are similar to LaMotta's.
Absolutely not.
Like, not that intensely. I don't
beat women.
even simplified versions like
Yeah.
that. I don't feel like any of us are struggling with our aggression like many people do of the male gender. I feel fortunate in that way. Obviously,
it's
it
easier when
happens.
you understand that talking is an option, you know?
And
Planning
It's
things
also
out
easier
verbally.
when everyone in your life isn't telling you need to be aggressive or that guy's going to kill you.
right.
Yeah,
Like
that's
you
true.
you gotta punch harder, buddy.
Definitely got to work on the passive aggressiveness.
Yes.
Oh my
There's
god.
too much of that.
I think
So
aggression.
much
I
passive
think aggression
aggressiveness.
in general is just something that the male species needs to work on. So
Yes.
it's fine.
Yeah.
And it can't just keep taking new forms.
Yeah.
No.
We just
And the
gotta-
only way anything's ever going to change is if we
Talk
talk
about
about it. God damn it.
Confront it.
So that's my piece on
Yeah.
this little topic here.
Well, I'm 100%.
Thank you for indulging me.
Oh, of course.
I guess
I figured
No need to think.
I figured it was okay because we going back
Yeah.
way too high watching this movie. We didn't take notes like we have been. There is no coherent plot we are positive about.
Well, I said before going into
he
recording
definitely
this,
hits people.
he does. I said before going into
Yes.
this podcast that I thought this was a good movie to lose the plot a bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the sense that it sort of just seems like a systematic cycle starting at hour one. Or no, I mean like hour one is in like moment 0 going to 2 hours and 9 minutes later. Then that's how long this movie
I
is.
think that sounds right.
But that is part of the reason that I think, similarly to how Brandon was feeling about this, I felt about New York, New York, but I felt a difference with Raging Bull, that this is a taxing experience. This is an experience that does take a toll on you mentally and in some way physically, because I'm pretty sure as soon as this movie ended and everyone went home, I immediately settled down and crashed. To the point where I woke up at 5 a.m. with all my normal, like, routine things that I normally have to do before I go to sleep at night out and not taken care of. And I'm like, oh, okay. So
Guess
I
I gotta
literally
knock you
just
out.
knocked myself out. Literally, Jake LaMotta punched me in the face so many times that I just finally passed out and keeled over. But I think for a film like this, at least in my preference level, I'd prefer this kind of experience or the way that it delivered it more than something like New York, New York. But to the point of what you had said earlier about the value of watching movies about people that you don't give a shit about or that you don't necessarily even care about to a certain degree. Because I don't really think there's much room, at least in my head, with LaMotta to like empathize. I think it is completely this. I know the word voyeuristic is wrong. And I say that only because voyeurism specifically refers to sexual in nature. But like
Sure.
just
Okay,
watching this, like a documentary about true crime.
It reminded
something
me
like
of
that.
the neo-realist very early on when the scene
Yeah,
where they were
absolutely.
fighting over the breakfast or whatever after the first fight. I was like, is that what he's doing? Is that
Yeah.
what he's trying to do?
I actually am curious. You guys are talking about neo-realism. What is that school of thought?
Scorsese, big fan. The old, mostly 40s Italian movies where it was supposed to be about real life. It was not running into fantasy. It was pointing the camera at reality. That's basically the gist. So, Bicycle Thieves. Italy was in a horrible economic state around the time of making that movie. So he makes a movie about a poor man whose only way of making money is a bike. Bike gets stolen. What is he going to do? Succumb to pressures of society. Oh, and he has like a lot of
Umberto
children.
D. another
Umberto
one.
D. Yeah.
Shoe Shine. I think those are all De Sica movies.
And
But then there's also
Rome, Open City.
Oh,
and,
so you're talking about Roberto Rossellini.
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
you
yeah.
have Paisan
Yeah.
and Rome Open City, and there's another one in there too. Germany Year Zero.
Yeah.
But those are Italian neo-realist films, and then I believe the early works of Antonioni and Fellini were also neo-realist works,
So it's just
and
trying to-
Pasolini too.
trying to capture reality, usually in less profitable states. So the beginning of Raging Bull especially feels like that.
Yeah. Well,
Very
not the
rigid.
intro. The opening like credits is its own thing. Very
Correct.
stylish and all
And
that.
then it goes
but-
straight. The first thing's a fight, right?
No, the first thing is actually the
Oh.
forward to him years later in his
Yeah.
club rehearsing before he goes out. He's doing
he's
like his
standing
bit,
there.
his spiel, rehearsing the bit before he goes out, and it's
Sad.
incredibly pathetic. But then it hard cuts into the ring years and
Yes.
years later.
And they're fighting.
At his
Yeah.
glory.
I will say,
41, I believe, is when we cut back to.
why is it a thing that anytime a dude smokes a cigar in the movie, he's got to deliver a monologue with the cigar in his mouth? It's like, I can't hear you. Well, and also, like, that's gross. Like, you're going to keep hitting that? It's got to be, like, soggy. Like, it fucks me up. Because
It's an aesthetic thing.
It took me out for a second where
It's an
I just
aesthetic
couldn't
thing.
stop thinking about that cigar.
It shows power. I don't know.
And then immediately started seeing dudes fucking hit each other, and I'm
Yep.
pulled right back into the tragedy of this movie.
And this is where we kind of start again into our cycle of fight and then back into the real life destruction, the real life brutality, back to the juxtaposition of the brutality in the ring.
To him, he doesn't have an on and off switch. It's always on. You're trained to be a killer.
Yeah.
They show he has to get angry, and he doesn't have sex, and that's how he stays in it at all times.
Yes.
That's why he can be a champion.
Yes.
Because he's worked up all the time.
Yes.
So that he can just hop in a ring and fucking beat someone half to death because we want to watch.
Yeah. The tone of this movie from the jump is incredibly uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
Just so you know, that is real. That's a real thing in boxing.
Oh, yeah.
I just found out about there's a celebrity boxing match, or the Jake Paul or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
It was a big deal for a minute, and one of the Paul's training regiment, he was training with like a real boxer. Like a real boxer was like, I'll take you on, I'll train you so you can have this amateur celebrity fight. And one of the things that was a part of his training was he was not allowed to have sex. They're like, it makes you more aggressive. It makes you more pumped up. It gets you have more testosterone in your body than ever.
Makes sense.
Crazy. That's how you treat like racehorses.
It's
Sports
literally
are
reducing people to animals.
And
nuts.
I think this movie does a great job of showing you what that does to people.
The first notes I took, and they are very incoherent and fucking high. I know, like, they're not good notes, but I like this first one.
Yeah.
They're also very sporadic. I think it's when I was like, I can feel my hands again. I'm gonna write something down.
Yeah.
I felt like I was fucking on a trip, but it's conditioning. And it's like this cycle that's forever. It reminded me of Gladiators. It was shot like a gladiator battle.
Yeah.
That first boxing match. And I was like,
Well,
oh
that
my
was
God.
very
And
intentional on Scorsese's part.
right. And that's what I mean. It feels like this thing that for some reason we can't learn from and shake as humans. It goes back to, there's a scene later when he's boxing. Sugar Ray, there's like jungle noises at one point. It's like literal growling.
Like lion noises.
And it's like, back literally to before there were humans. It's like two things you just fight each
Primal.
other. And it still exists. And we still haven't evolved out of it because we have things like this that perpetuate it to be violent. Violent contact sports of any kind, honestly. And it's a weird thing. It's like, should they not exist? No, I guess. But it's like,
it's something that has been a part of our society since like the beginning of time. You got fucking old Greek Olympic wrestling and shit like that, where it's like we've always, and the gladiators, the arenas, the Roman Colosseum that still stands to this day. We've always glorified violent confrontation. The only step forward we've made is that you're not technically, it's not a battle to the death.
Yeah.
But
you hear the bell and you stop.
You're supposed to. But there is a clause in all of these close contact sports, MMA, boxing, that if you die in the ring, it's no one's fault.
Yep.
So technically, if you go in there with which you're supposed to, the mentality to kill, you can, and it's fine.
Jesus.
That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And you stop when they tell you to stop.
So how can you become anything but a beast when you're treated like one?
It's interesting how I think you could take, this is one of those kinds of films that you could take the base narrative, which ironically is a true story, and apply it to any time period in history.
Yes.
And it would probably work.
Just switch the profession.
And I've said that about Carrie before too, where it's like you can just take the narrative, plug it into any time period,
honestly,
and boom, still works.
Kids are always assholes.
Exactly. The importance of a movie like Raging Bull, these are lessons that are timeless. These are cycles that seem to keep happening over and over again, and if we don't address them, they're only going to keep.
But then is this only helping it?
Maybe.
But
I don't think anyone's watching this and going like,
right.
I want to do that.
We fucking hope. Do you remember when you were 13 and watched this for the first time? I don't remember being like, that guy rules. I like when he hits people. But I don't remember being like, what a monster.
I don't
remember an impression being made because I think I was just like, yeah, okay.
Well, see, I don't think
and
when
that's
I was
dangerous.
When I was a kid, I didn't look at things more like at 13. I don't think I was looking at them with as tight a moral lens as I was looking at them with now. So I think like
but
when
that's
I was like,
even more important.
Absolutely, but I was like bad guy, but
I'm not confident I did do that.
Not watching it in that proactive way that I would not. So not applying that kind of logic to it.
I'm just saying,
not thinking of it in that sense. But I did not, and I think that may have been part of the reason it didn't resonate in the way that other movies have.
True.
And especially in his canon. But why something like Taxi Driver would and this doesn't? It's interesting, because Travis Bickle is like far worse if you're really thinking about it.
Well, what I've been thinking about Raging Bull is that you're seeing the mentality of Scorsese's previous characters formed into like physicality. Like, to me, every fucking blow that he lands on an innocent person, or even on Sugar Ray and the other people he boxes, every blow that Jake LaMotta lands is something that Travis Bickle wanted to do. It's something that
he has success from the jump.
Jimmy Doyle wants to do. It's like you're seeing these evil characters' semi-success story.
Well,
like
look-
the best that their terrible lives could get.
Yeah.
Look at what happens when you put success in the hands of these people. This is really the first example that you truly see somebody take, like, he was the champion. Like, that was
The
something
world
Brandon
knew
had
him.
said to me when we were talking about prior to recording this podcast, Raging Bull and his thoughts on it. And he was just like, he got rewarded. He got what he wanted.
Yep.
Like, that doesn't help my confusion morally on this. And I'm like, right, but did it pay off? That's
Can
where
it ever?
This is where I'm going to come back to The Irishman a bit. Because, and this is spoilers for The Irishman.
Just now, never again.
But how this is linked, where I think that there's a shift. He wins the fight. That is where Rocky ends. They
No,
shot this.
Rocky loses, by the
Or
way.
Rocky, I know, but I'm just mean like when the fight, fucking end. Like, and I say
yes,
Rocky
yes, yes, yes.
almost as like a cliche.
Also,
Yeah.
his loss
The
is
boxing
women
movies,
in his
right?
eyes, it's fine.
Isn't that funny that Rocky sets up the cliches for boxing movies and he loses? That's the one movie.
But he went
But he
12
went
rounds.
win.
Well, yeah, it went
Yeah.
12 rounds. Yeah.
That's
So
winning.
stupid.
Yeah.
It is pretty
It's
stupid.
like the
Rocky's not good.
the fucking electoral votes.
I'm
Fucking-
dropping my rating on Rocky, by the way. Just
Cool.
half a star.
I didn't like it that much
It was
when
a
I saw
2.5
it.
star
I saw
movie.
it too
It's
late.
fine.
But that's a reason why Scorsese shot this in black and white. There's apparently a couple of reasons why that was a choice. But part of it was because it was a distinction from Rocky, because they were both boxing movies coming out around the same time.
They're 4 years apart.
Well, I guess like when you're really
But
thinking
still,
about it.
okay,
Yeah.
back then,
At the
that might
time,
be
yes.
still-
Because movies played in theaters forever
That's
back
true.
then.
Sometimes
So
like
Rocky
a
was
year.
still out probably at this point. It was
No
a huge
way.
hit.
4 years?
I mean, like those movies had runs like crazy.
When
and people would
Rocky
bring them
2
back all the
come out?
time. I don't know.
79, year before.
But
That-
still,
that makes
Rocky 2 being that prevalent. Regardless, that was part of the reason. But I think that the black and white here pulls all the color away in the same way Scorsese almost mutes the emotions in The Irishman. Whereas like the negativity and the angry, or the anger and the rage boiling between not just LaMotta but all the people he comes across.
Yeah.
Because that energy is just somebody coming. I've never been confronted with that much anger in my life, so I can't know for sure. But I have to imagine some of it's got to rub off on anybody that he directs that at.
Yeah, the most stereotypical alpha male.
So that kind of
Quote,
energy
unquote.
just pulls all the life out of everything. The film is only lively in the ring. Like, the shots are ridiculous, the style is insane, but then whenever we're back in the home, it's very, like you said, neo-realist in a way. Very still. The camera probably moves a few times, but I don't ever remember anything too
Nothing huge.
distinct. Yeah, nothing crazy. It's very subtle.
You gotta
Same
sit with that stuff.
same as The Irishman. But
and
then,
those scenes drag on too.
yes, we get to the point where, similar in The Irishman, the movie has a point where it should end, in theory. To
Well,
most people, too. It's a complaint.
when he achieves the goal.
Yeah, kills Jimmy.
Whoa.
I already
You
said we're spoiling
we're
The Irishman.
You're right.
But then we have what makes the whole kit and caboodle for me is the last 45 minutes of The Irishman.
Well, after that, it's like an hour, isn't it?
No, I think it's like 45 minutes when I've really put it together.
Okay.
But the Reckoning
Yeah.
chapter, the epilogue,
The
The
quote
after.
unquote fall that's not exactly
the
a fall.
the reason we're watching the movie.
Right.
And it's the same thing with LaMotta, but in this
true.
and then we have like a section where LaMotta wins the fight, and then everything after that is him slowly falling from grace.
Yep.
And
What-
barely grace.
Yeah.
Grace to the outside world, because nobody knows the inner life of Jake LaMotta and those who know him.
Right.
They just know the champion on the front page.
So that makes it all okay.
In his mind, yeah.
In everyone's mind for a while.
Well, probably. But I'm sure that people weren't looking at, fighters, I guess, in that specific way. Like, and I
don't
guess
think
obviously
so.
in the pop culture and
I don't
things.
think people cared.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
especially at the
huge
time.
celebrities.
Yeah.
But I don't think, celebrity culture has changed completely than what it was 6 years
LaMotta
ago.
doesn't seem to live like a lively existence either, or like a wealthy one at that.
No.
Like, he seems to come from not much
Yeah.
and goes back to not much
I'm sure
after
boxing-
every fight.
Now,
I'm looking back at that.
okay, back then might not be that great.
To the point, like,
Now they get back.
there's a
The good
specific
boxers get back.
there's a specific scene in the latter chapter of Raging Bull in which De Niro sees his brother, played by Joe Pesci, again for what is probably the first time in years, and it's an accident, it seems, unless De Niro knew where he was and was seeking him out, but Pesci did not know he was going to be there, and he's desperately trying to get him to just talk to him, just trying to get Pesci to finally communicate with him again. And it's funny that De Niro's the one begging, because Pesci had been begging the entire movie for Jake to just calm down and talk to him. Essentially,
brother.
right? I'm your brother. I'm your blood. Blah, blah, blah.
At this-
Christ. Anyway,
That's there.
we're coming to that soon, I'm sure. But then he tries to give him a hug, I'm pretty sure.
Tries to give him
it's
hugs
just
and
the most
kisses.
uncomfortable thing in the world. And obviously, it's even more jarring that not only did De Niro gain so much weight for that latter half, but Pesci lost weight.
The size difference between these two men.
It's striking. But then obviously we have a very similar scene with Paquin and De Niro in The Irishman. Yes. Not similar in that like they don't drag it out as long. It's a very quick scene, but it's just as emotionally impactful, and the weight of that resonates throughout. And I'm sure if I were to go back and rewatch Raging Bull sooner than later, which it does not sound pleasant, but I might be more affecting, is being able to understand that relationship and knowing where it goes. Like seeing The Irishman a second time and having all that information made the entire movie that much more emotionally hefty. But definitely. It's those kinds of moments that strike me as the saddest, because it's like in that moment in time, that person is desperately trying to make right over the things that they had done wrong. Even if they didn't totally understand, they realized that there was a shift, and it's too fucking late. And intrinsically, beautiful. I feel bad.
Beautiful.
There's no question about it. But did he deserve to be forgiven? Same with The Irishman. Like, completely understood with Anna Paquin's situation. Yeah. But I think it's very interesting how he's already exploring that territory here in 1980, that directly. Because we talked about how that portion of The Irishman was like the culmination of his entire career and the perfect, like, not to say that we wish it was his last movie, because God knows. Like, it would have been very fitting if it was. Yeah. But this is a point he's touched on before, which fascinates me. I didn't remember that going into The Irishman the first time.
Me neither.
So it'll be interesting going back this time. That's all. Sorry to go off on a tangent about The Irishman.
No, dude, you just blew my mind, because that is so crazy that you're saying that. Because they're not necessarily the bookends, but this being,
So I think that's what the movie's about.
Yeah, this being like sort of like the first iteration of that, and seeing how it travels to The Irishman and how it's kind of like the opposite in the same context in both movies. In The Irishman, when he's going up to Anna Paquin and he's basically like saying like, I don't understand why, you girls won't talk to me. Like, I don't know what I did. And then she tells him how terrible
the daughter that will talk to him.
Oh, God. Am I thinking of the wrong scenes?
Yeah, Anna Paquin's the one who won't talk to him.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, still, keep rolling.
Either way, there's that scene where he is an older man and he's talking to that daughter and basically saying like, why, like, he's like, I am sorry, like, I do love you guys, I want to be able to talk to you guys and I don't understand why I can't. And she goes over all the terrible things that he did in their lives that we never see throughout the entire journey, things that like I wasn't shocked to hear. Right. You can infer. Frank Sheeran's not a nice dude. He beats the fuck out of people. That's his answer. Seeing the opposite happen with Raging Bull, where he's going up to Pesci and he's apologizing and he's not getting why it's not working, but we've seen what happens.
I don't know if it's that he's not getting it. It's just he wants it to happen so bad.
I think
even if he knows it won't.
If he understood, he wouldn't be there. He wouldn't be grabbing him like that, because I feel the fear. No, when I see their size difference, and I understand that the last time that these two men saw each other, he was viscerally beating him into the ground.
Yeah.
When
For
I think about
he didn't do.
When I think about that large man coming back years later and trying to hug me, I get so scared. I feel so scared for Pesci. Like, I know he wasn't having a good time. Yeah. At least that character. And so seeing how he can do that, basically put the character who's done wrong in a situation where they're trying to, recollect and connect and do better, but saying that there is a point where it's too late, where you can't redeem yourself. It's showing an irredeemable character.
Yeah, at least in the context of the movie, and showing the consequences of what those actions carry over. Even if, like, for instance, I think something like The Irishman, Sheeran doesn't necessarily receive as pathetic a life after, because I think if you think about LaMotta, like having a stand-up comedy career, and it's almost like a movie we will actually talk about later, OJ Made in America, but similar there, where it's like
juiced by OJ
did not go to prison for what he did, but the life he led after that was so ungodly and specifically pathetic that it's almost worse. And I don't know if he knows that necessarily. Similar to how like LaMotta, I'm not necessarily sure of, but there are scenes to indicate LaMotta's inner pain and all that, and knowing that he must realize, like, look what I've done to myself, look what the life I've built for myself. It's really, really a lot to take, especially by the end. And when we get to that scene where he's in, I believe it's the jail cell, and he's beating the shit out of the wall and screaming his fucking lungs out, probably like the objective best acting De Niro's done, if you're thinking of it from a very cliche standpoint. Like, that's the Oscar moment you roll on De Niro's whole career, probably.
Did he say, is it stupid? Or no, it's why.
Yeah, you so stupid. Why?
Hit hit. He's smacking.
And he
his head
goes to
against the
jail
wall.
because he fucked a kid.
No.
right?
No. He let a kid get fucked.
Oh God, still.
Much
Yeah,
better.
It's not, but it's not good. But that's also a running theme in his whole life because his wife was 15 when he eyed
Yeah,
her.
oof, God. How old was he when the movie started?
So he was 20 when she was 15.
He was 20 when she. I guess like
it's still
like
not
it's
good.
still not. No, it's not good.
It's
but it's
not
like
as-
when he reaches 30 and she's 25. It's like if you're still married. It's like, I guess it worked out for
I
him.
think doesn't he wait till she's 18 before he actually does anything?
Maybe. Oh, what is he like, Charlie Chaplin?
Yeah.
Yikes.
But he definitely was courting her when he was 15 and using her to rile him up and then not having sex with her.
God, that scene is so. Oh, it's grueling. It's so
Painful.
uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable.
I know I brought it up last episode, but I just saw going back to my high notes, his vertigo. And I think this movie actually does
Interesting.
follow that more.
Interesting.
Especially with her. Like,
Ah.
and then it's the same. It's just obsession and chasing the thing that you think you always want.
Yeah.
And then this movie explores then you get it.
Yeah,
Now what?
exactly.
Die on the cross.
Yeah.
So when do we talk about that? This is just Jesus.
Well, I think getting into that now is a great time. Hit it up, baby.
I don't even know. I wrote it down a few times.
Yeah.
There's the shots of his body in the first fight. I'm pretty sure they do it. And I was gonna say it out loud to you guys, and I'm like, they're just gonna be like, shut the fuck up. But then later, everybody was like, Jesus. I was like, good.
No, dude, it's absolutely it's pretty on
So
the
many-
nose by a
so
certain
many
point in the movie.
times.
That was a thing I didn't feel great about after watching it, was feeling that the movie almost is too obviously symbolic of a lot of ideas and
I
older
definitely prefer
notions.
things less on the nose. I think that Taxi Driver and this have a lot of similarities in the ideas that they're like
Yes.
looking at
Yes.
in a way.
And New York.
Yeah. Oh, well, absolutely. Especially in like the ideas of the character tropes.
And the
Fucking-
visual tropes.
Well, I guess no. Those three, I would
Or-
definitely stagger them as
Okay.
far as their stylistic choices because they all seem to be very specific in doing the things they're doing.
Yeah, that's true.
But the Christ illusions in Taxi Driver are far more subtle
Yes.
than they are here.
That's true.
Because there's literally a point where LaMotta has his arms stretched across
Yeah.
the ring.
When he gives up the
Yeah.
title.
Yeah, and he's being pummeled.
Yeah, he's
That's
sacrificing
That's his
himself.
repentance.
He's literally saying, "Oh my god!"
But then he still doesn't even repent because he has to walk up and go, "You knocked me down."
Well, it's like, what if? Oh God! Well, I didn't. You know what happens in the movie, but it's like this is his bridge to Last Temptation of Christ. What if he didn't die for our sins?
Right.
Because this is, I think, a more direct interpretation of the idea of like because I said this to Frank earlier, the question, which he then replied, well, it's the same question. Do you believe in Christ or do you believe you are Christ?
Right. I mean,
Elaborate, please.
The idea in Christianity is you're supposed to live your life like Christ. You're supposed to follow in his teachings, follow in his ways, right?
Yeah.
And for some reason, that has been misconstrued centuries upon centuries as one must become Christ. And
Yeah.
this is my whole weird thing that I always feel awkward talking about, but it's being raised in Catholic.
You were raised
and
Catholic, so
going-
I think you have a right.
and went to Catholic school for a while and have struggled with my faith until a few years ago when it was like, okay, now I know where I am. And it's not this, but...
Not discouraging anybody
No, that's
who
fine.
has faith.
but
If you like God, get the fuck out.
nah, you can stay. It's cool. I get the... Never mind. That's not what we're talking about. But it is a thing. It's obviously not everyone, but priests fall into this trap often, which is why I think First Reformed is effective, also written by Paul Schrader, as well as this, and Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
And
Can you tell that
they're
the
all-
artist is related to the art?
Yeah, but it's the mixing up the voice of God with the voice in your head. I'm following the teachings, I'm praying, I'm being true, but all that you're getting back is your own thoughts that are reverberating, and
Yeah.
you're mistaking the two. You're getting, because true faith would be not trying, doing, and then there's conscious thought behind trying that makes you think you're falling into, I am the one that can do the change. I will help these people. I will change their minds. I will guide them. I will absolve them of their sins. In the case of LaMotta, I think it's more, I'm on the path of glory. I'm sacrificing my body. I'm sacrificing myself for this glory that will
That's
come.
it.
And it's all about him.
Yeah.
It's making it all about him. His whole world revolves around him, which is what you guys were getting at earlier with the people in his life.
Yeah, they
getting more
struggled
aggressive.
not to just exist in his life, but he needs to control them.
Because he's trying to follow the path of Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's living, it's misunderstood of what the teachings are supposed to be. Because Christianity's base, it's like, yeah, you guys got good ideas. It's just the dumb men usually who take it and run with it the wrong way.
Poor execution. Good ideas.
Good ideas. But in Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, I think actually follows that idea more closely.
I was about to say that the person who thinks that they are Christ because they were listening to the voice in their own head.
Right.
Yeah.
He's sacrificing himself literally with his life to kill evil.
Yes.
And he thought it was one thing and then ended up being another, and he's a hypocrite, and that's the whole goddamn
I think
thing.
that's part of the reason why a lot of these movies are so interesting. The ones that are good anyway, because of that idea that how does this world exist with all of these people in it?
Yeah.
If I've never run across one of them.
And
Yeah.
Scorsese, I think it's important to talk about. I think we might have. I'm not positive. Was almost going to be a priest.
I think we may have touched on that.
Very
before.
close to joining the priesthood, and then decided to make movies. And
Yeah.
it's like, this is clearly a thing he's wrestling with.
Mhm.
And then how that mentality translates into filmmaking and
I think
being
that's
the
part of the-
director and being the sole vision, and then fame coming into play instead of followers in a religion. It's success in celebrity, and it's all the same thing. Everything's the fucking same. It's all annoying.
I always find it
Art is a
interesting
lie.
talking
Nothing is
about
real.
religion in movies like this because Jesse,
I'm Frank.
Brandon.
I have never been a very religious person, like even in childhood. Like we went to church for the first 4 years of my life, and even then I remember not getting anything out of it, never enjoying going to church by any stretch.
It's not fun.
Loosely believing in God and Jesus and all that, but it was pretty much just that. And I went to a Presbyterian church, so they didn't really give any strict rules or, guidelines to me. Like everything was always just teaching. But I got out of there at a very young age, basically just out of consciousness. And it's never been something that's been attached to my life. And obviously, in the world of just the entire world, religion and Christianity very specifically, and I guess if you want to get even more specific, Catholicism is also very important to the lives of many, 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 many people around the world, but especially in America. Obviously, a lot of the cinema that I then ingest as a cinephile is very driven by religious themes, specifically Christian and Catholic.
Scorsese is not one to beat around the bush.
And Scorsese is not one to beat around the bush. And because there is such a vast majority of people that connect to movies on that level because of their faith, that's probably in large part a very big reason why Scorsese has endured over the years and was as big as he was. Literally probably helped propel him into a certain echelon of filmmaking.
The story of Jesus is a classic hero's journey.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's a great base for a story.
Excuse me?
That's why it catches on, man.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it isn't even real. Maybe it's all literally fact. It still follows the formula of a hero's journey.
That's what I was even saying about
compels.
LaMotta. It's like, this is a dramatic story that, like, okay, to go back to OJ, I'm like, the story of
Titan
OJ
who
Simpson's
falls.
life, I'm like, you can't write that. Reverse that. I meant to say, you can. Because that seems like something that should only be in a movie. Like,
Fair.
how that's real, unbelievable to me. Like, all those details, all those things, all those literal, like, life being metaphorical in the way that art is intentionally metaphorical, that's the only proof I've ever seen of a God. That there is an artist constructing all of this as if all of our lives are, dramatic tales that are being watched by somebody.
How many famous people, creators have said that real life is always more interesting than art?
Absolutely.
You're not trying to simplify it.
But
it's complex and involves 7 billion people and a lot of animals and a lot of other things we don't understand.
Point is, religion is not something I've ever been too tapped into as far as actually understanding the mechanics of how religion ties in and what the importance is and the specific details of certain symbols and metaphors that are used either visually, but especially the films of Scorsese. So if there were any other specific, like, Christian elements that were at play here that you would have noticed or anything, I'd be certainly curious to hear more.
There's the blood-soaked rags, the blood on the ropes, the blood of Christ. You can take it. And the blood in the body, that's what you get at every mass, And that is the two things he is literally sacrificing every time he's in the ring at his pulpit, at his film. It's, however you want to look at it. Everything breaks down to that. So it's the imagery of the body mostly, I think. It's mostly in the fight scenes. I can't picture or think of anything outside other than I think there was a cross or two throughout. Like, I think he is supposed to be religious, which is how I think that whole thing, I was like, this is 110% what's happening.
Did Scorsese comment, like, when because I know that, like, at least from the talks you and I have had, that when movies or entertainment can be preachy in a way that feels like it is objectively minded in the sense that, like, it's not welcoming anyone that isn't of the faith.
Yeah.
Like, or showing a perspective that could be viewed from any different perspective. Do you think that Scorsese at this point, specifically Raging Bull, but even across the rest of his career, because we haven't really talked about it, has done that in a way that you think can be interpreted across a bunch of different spectrums? Or do you think it is very specifically like this is a religious experience or film, like in defining the beliefs? Or do you think it's more of him reckoning with a struggle to be faithful?
I definitely think that's the driving force.
Okay.
That last
The
one.
latter.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is the struggle, and that's definitely present. I think the only time it ever bothered me was Silence. But I
Yeah,
I
that's the
wouldn't
most direct
be-
movie. And
Right.
Last Temptation.
But the things I know about Last Temptation, it's like I know that it's about the struggle
Right.
of being Jesus.
Yeah.
Hilarious. But I'm excited to watch it. But Silence is the only time I've struggled, and I wouldn't be surprised if that struggle wasn't there, or if my negative feelings weren't there when we rewatch it. I think he allows for a lot of doubt and never forgets the dramatic nature of the stories he's telling.
Yeah.
But I think it's an inherent quality in him, and that's kind of what we were talking about before. You can't really separate the art from the artist, and maybe
Yeah.
it's just him. It's personifying his greatest fear.
Does that
what if
mute
God
any of
does
your
exist?
feelings on his films though? Like, does that Christian or Catholic religious element, whatever you want to call it, does that impede any of your feelings? Like, you wouldn't feel, or you'd feel better about the film if those elements were not as present?
No, because I think they're more honest, and
Okay.
honesty is always the most exciting element of any art.
I agree. I'm with you
At
on
least perceived honesty.
that. I think it's more interesting to be able to view it from the lens, and I think specifically watching movies in the way that we are watching them right now, it works that much better because you can really see it for what it is and almost look at it as a biography of the artist of sorts.
Should we talk about this right now?
Maybe.
Is that
Not a
right?
bad idea, but I guess to that point, before we go into it, just because Raging Bull, anything else we really want to talk about?
Don't beat your wife.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Don't be your wife.
I mean,
Don't beat anyone.
I guess we should talk about like the technicality of the movie 'cause it's
Okay.
pretty fucking good. I mean, just like the filmmaking and the performances.
Yeah.
I know we talked about De Niro and Pesci. I mean, how are you guys up to this point? How does this rank for De Niro? Do you think it's better than Taxi Driver?
Yeah. In terms of performance, the nails are getting better with every movie for me personally.
Really? New York, New York?
He's
I
been
think
getting
so.
like
You
I don't
said
think
you thought he was bad in the movie.
I said
On
he's
mic.
not a good romantic lead, and I don't think he made a good performance in that sense.
I can play the clip if it's there, so I'll insert it.
You insert the clip. I'll say it. I might be in the minority. I don't think De Niro did a good job. But I'm saying what I'm saying right now. I think with every movie, Robert De Niro's getting better just as an actor. Like learning how to be in front of a camera and learning how to, look organic and look, like he's got some sort of chemistry with the person on there. Because, I don't like his characters and I don't like the way that he necessarily performed as Jimmy Doyle, but like he made it work for 2 hours and 40 fucking minutes. So
I
whatever.
actually personally believe that what you said in just like a preference and performance level. Just like I think he's gotten better every movie. I think more of Taxi Driver's success is Scorsese
Absolutely.
than his performance.
100%.
And Raging Bull, I think, is actually more De Niro than Scorsese by the end.
Even though when you first asked the question, my initial thought was Taxi Driver being the favorite performance. But I do think that this is the better performance in Raging Bull, no question.
Worthy of that Oscar.
Oh, absolutely.
His
This
last
this
Oscar.
is a performance. Like he runs the gamut of emotion, high, low. He does everything. And he uses his entire body, like we were saying. Like not just, his words and the way he speaks, delivering good piece of dialogue after piece of dialogue, but every hit he lays. Even LaMotta, who actually trained with him and apparently thousands of rounds or hundreds of rounds, had said that he thought De Niro had what it took to be a real contender. So he really fucking put in the work to play this part. It meant a lot to him, obviously.
Method acting at its craziest, which, I generally don't dig down on. It's not.
Well, was it method in this case in the sense that he was being LaMotta off camera too?
No, but that commitment to the physicality and the learning and getting in the mindset. I'm sure he
Gaining
wasn't.
and losing weight,
I'm sure he
muscle
wasn't
mass.
having a blast to be around on set.
Yeah,
I'm sure he wasn't like, cut. Hey, where's the fucking? I'm gonna crack a joke.
But I do think this is his best performance. Even though I just want to note again that all of us were saying, "God damn, De Niro's good in Taxi Driver."
His best up to this point.
Yeah, because I was even thinking like Mean Streets is pretty fucking good.
He's pretty fucking good in Mean Streets.
He's
Pretty fucking good in Taxi Driver. He's pretty fucking good in New York.
He's a good actor.
Think bottom
who
line.
would've thunk? Who would have thought?
And especially in a year that has fucking Nicholson in The Shining.
Yeah.
And you have oh my God, what Elephant Man. John Hurt.
John Hurt, yeah.
And
Anthony Hopkins, too. He's good in it.
And Pacino in Cruising.
Oh, yeah. That's a great performance.
You got a year of like some great leading actors, but De Niro stands on top.
And then this is probably top 3 De Niro performances, if I'm really thinking about it. Because Taxi Driver probably would have been up there normally, and I think that this bumped it out. Because I think that my favorite is still The Irishman.
It's my favorite.
However, I don't know who is the bigger star here. De Niro
or Scorsese
or Thelma.
Oh, yeah. We
have not talked about Thelma, and I thought now's a better time than I to bring her up. This is the second collaboration Martin Scorsese officially had with Thelma Schoonmaker, at least in his feature film work, because she edited Who's That Knocking at My Door?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So that was the last time they'd worked together. Terrible movie. Very poorly edited. Thelma, we love you, but not good. Here, Thelma does what she even considers apparently to be her best work.
Do you know the bit of her career between those two films?
No.
She did editing on Woodstock. Either was nominated for an Oscar or won an Oscar, but she didn't join the guild, so then she couldn't work. Because a part of being in the guild or the union or whatever, you had to be an apprentice for like 3 years.
Pay your dues, yeah.
And she was like, I'm nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go be someone's apprentice. And so she couldn't get like official union work until this movie.
Wow.
I think Marty just was like, I don't give a shit. She's editing my movie. And then she won an Oscar for this.
Yeah.
So her
Nice.
technically like third real movie is this. And it is pretty fucking phenomenal.
And hearing the way that Thelma, because again, I think that this is something as like a aspiring filmmaker is just like a nice little anecdote to hear as to that every night after filming would complete, Martin Scorsese would take the reels back to his apartment in New York City, and him and Thelma would edit what they had shot over that day the night after they'd shot it. And I just like can imagine having been in editing rooms with my friends, having been in those intimate spaces where you're creating and you're working on something, and I could only imagine having something as brilliant as Raging Bull on our hands.
Yeah.
Theoretically, like thinking about we are sitting in my apartment right now. To think that they just went back to their apartment to edit Raging Bull.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Unbelievable and pretty inspiring too.
Yeah.
And just to think about the level of community that is involved in filmmaking really, really, really makes me happy.
It has to be a collaborative effort.
Yes.
Okay, no alone.
And Thelma's presence here is clear because I don't know if a movie other than maybe Taxi Driver has been edited with such distinct style as this up to this point in Scorsese's career.
100%.
Every cut feels like a punch.
Yeah.
And that's obviously very intentional. And every hard cut out of the ring back into LaMotta's reality is even harsher.
And I think
And that's Thelma.
my favorite moment in the movie, outside of the ending, or not even the ending, the jail scene.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously.
Yeah. Jail
But,
scene's pretty good stuff.
My other favorite was the transition montage, the color photos all of a sudden.
Yeah, that was great.
Which is supposed to be like home videos and home photos
Yeah.
and stuff. And it felt like 2001 almost. It had, because the music was playing to it, and it was just this montage to propel time forward. And it was gorgeous and informative.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, how did you think of that?
Yeah.
Just like, you know what we're going to do in the middle of our movie is home videos.
And it's going to be
and
in color.
fights. And fights intercut with it,
Yeah.
too.
And
Just letting it go by.
I think it's interesting maybe to point out now that another reason that this film was potentially shot in black and white is that LaMotta stated in his book that when he looks back on his life, sometimes at night, I think that's the quote, he sees it as a black and white movie. He doesn't know why, but it is. And I think that almost plays an interesting part in the idea that like this might be like his memory piece looking back, because the photos, the objective things that you can hold in your hand still from the past are in color because those things were in color. But when you look back at the memory, because of the energy that you had conjured within them, all the color in life is pulled from them.
Fuck yeah.
That was deep.
Yeah, that was good.
But
Good
thank
stuff.
you. Anyway.
I don't know.
Oh,
Thelma rules.
Yeah, Thelma rules. Thelma's great. And to point out that she edits every movie of Scorsese's career, I believe,
From here
on out.
Yep.
Including the Irishman?
Including the Irishman.
Way to go, Thelma. Where's
She
the
deserves like
Oh,
1,000.
I can't believe
Oscars.
she didn't win for that movie.
It's ridiculous.
There are a couple of moments in Scorsese's career later down the line that I remember being like, "Ooh, Thelma, what are you doing?" But I'll see if I still have those
Disagree.
I'll
I
see
know what
if-
you're referencing. I know you're talking about My Little Gem, The Departed.
one specific movie. Yes.
Yeah, I know what you're doing over there. I say no.
I might like it more now.
It's awesome.
Okay.
It's just random injections of life.
Yes, but I guess
She's going wild.
to that point, cinematography is great across the board. The music in
Velma.
this is all great. The use of sound is very specific to like every scene in The Ring is incredibly visceral. Not like in the way that Scorsese shoots those scenes of The Ring that we brought up earlier. He shot them so specifically because he didn't want to do multicam easy shoots. He really wanted to choreograph and storyboard every single moment of those fights, so that way the camera would sort of feel like a third fighter, like feel like somebody else in the ring with LaMotta and whoever he was fighting. And I think it really works, like really, really well in this movie. Those scenes are very exhilarating, and I think that if anything, that's what puts you in the mind of LaMotta the best, in the sense that that is why he goes into the ring, for that energy, for that glory that you had like mentioned earlier, that feeling. And they try to get the audience maybe to feel that a little bit too, to understand to some degree why LaMotta is the way he is.
For me, the fight is the juice.
Hey.
It is the juice.
You got to bring heat in as much as you can.
Hell yeah.
This is the last time he worked with Michael Chapman. Who he only
As his
worked with.
DP?
Yeah.
Okay.
Taxi Driver, Last Waltz, and this. Only
Wow.
once.
Wow.
So he
Last
did.
Waltz.
That's one of his docs.
Yeah.
Oh.
A music doc.
Or concert movie.
Yes,
And
concert movie.
slash
Music doc.
documentary.
Yep.
It's supposed to be the best one. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I'm curious to see it. But anyway, you know what's funny? Just to abridge briefly, I watched an interview with Martin Scorsese recently in which he said that he treated The Last Waltz as he would any of his features and deems it just as important.
Now we have to watch it.
Well, unless we don't get emailed about that Patreon.
Yeah, email us. Chronic Canon and Gmail.
The Chronic Canon at gmail.com. Plug.
Joe Pesci and Kathy Moriarty.
Kathy Moriarty.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're both nominated for Oscars. We happy about that?
That's pretty cool.
I'd say yes.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy. I think the performances across the board are great. I think De Niro eats the screen, but I think that that's intentional. And I think Pesci is very subtle. I think Kathy Moriarty is very subtle.
I think they're both great.
They get moments to shine.
I definitely
obviously.
like their characters.
Yeah.
Pesci took a fucking broken rib for this movie.
Why the fuck are you actually hitting people, you maniac?
I mean, that was probably
He's
a choice
lost
on
in
the
the
both
sauce.
of their parts, honestly. I can see De Niro and Pesci being like, we're going to hit each other, right?
I can see
Like-
Pesci be like, don't fucking hit me.
Or Pesci just be like, only if I get to hit you, fuck.
Come here, you fuck guy.
But yeah, great across the board in this. And I think just as far as his Scorsese as a director too, I think he's coming in full form to the point where like his abilities are becoming so natural. Like it seems like these movies are getting more and more effortless and they're becoming less choppy and less messy. They're becoming more refined and skilled as he I mean that's natural, but like being that he's so good at the jump, well not at the jump but pretty close, the fact that he's already reached the point that he reaches by Raging Bull, also pretty staggering.
Is there anything anybody else wants to discuss about this movie in particular?
Even though I didn't like watching it, I understand the movie has merit.
I think
I'll give it that.
You don't have to like a movie or watch it to know it's good. It's like I was saying with New York. I can totally appreciate when anyone will like it. I don't have to.
I mean, that's how I feel about most of the great movies. But, that's just me.
I just want to talk before we get a little blunt. The notion of, is what we're doing an effective way to watch and consume media? How we're going through Scorsese's filmography, because this whole time we've been praising this movie.
I would say that we've only been in the camp of praise. The only things that we would have said that would have been negative would have been things that were mostly based on preference. Like I can understand that as a technical feat, Raging Bull is a pretty perfect beast.
Right.
But
so it's that stick of preference.
Yeah.
Does our preference get swayed because we're watching all these movies in a row, and as something we're almost beating to a dead horse at this point? Obviously, all the movies are a reflection of Scorsese to some degree, and they're dealing with similar protagonists, so we're getting similar stories, especially up to this point. I'd say all 7 are pretty damn similar thematically in some overarching way. So is that hurtful toward your feelings of Raging Bull, possibly? Like, if I just watched this on its own randomly, would this have hit me like a freight train? Or is it always going to hit with that less enthused feel? And guess I'm saying, is it a smart way to get so steeped in a filmography when trying to judge individual films?
I think that when it comes to watching directors the way that we have been the last couple of years, because at least Frank and I, like we've tried with people like Akira Kurosawa, Ingmar Bergman, Alfred Hitchcock on my end, Brian De Palma, running down their entire filmographies so that way we can say that we are educated on that director and we know their filmography back to front and can spot the inconsistencies and hopefully learn a thing or two from the people that we admire so much. And I think that as far as an educational tool, like in like the film realm of all of this, it's effective if you're looking at it constantly from that lens. And I also think that just as a consumer of art, it is also educational and important to see things in that fashion. However, I do think that depending on, at least in my case, my mood or like where I'm at that day, or like what's going on in my life at the time, watching one movie over another can help the movie in a way. Like if I'm more in the mood for something like King of Comedy over Raging Bull, I'm more inclined to like King of Comedy more at that point in time, most likely. But simultaneously, because originally I was just going to fight and say, like, I think that this is a cool way to watch movies, like just in general. But then I was like, well, you know, honestly, and this is somebody who I would at this current moment say is my favorite director. I don't think I could sit and watch every David Lynch movie in one go. Like a weekend? Oh my God.
Well,
like,
we're not doing a weekend.
No, I know, but I'm even saying like week to week, I don't even know. Like if those movies would have the impact that all of them have, because like most of those movies, I'd rank the full gauntlet 5 out of 5. But then I'm like, if I watch them all consistently, very often, am I more inclined to then latch on to the ones that really stick that much more? But then I guess to that point, is it more valuable in that you get to really decide which ones you truly love in that moment? Because I think, again, that's the other point I wanted to make. Last thing before I'll pass the baton to Brandon is that's the thing about movies and aging and changing. No matter where you are in your life, the elements are going to work in some specific way to then drive your opinion one way or another about a film. I've gone lukewarm on movies and then loved them. I've loved movies and then not liked them, dependent on the rewatch and when I saw them. So there are so many variables that come into it that it makes me like hesitant to give a definitive answer to that question.
Yeah.
But I think it has its pros and I think it has its cons. And I think the only cons specifically come, I guess, maybe more apropos that Brandon take the mic in your case.
Cons is everything. Watching movies by one dude sucks. I hate this. I'm out. On the real, though, I think from an educational standpoint, from a filmmaker's point of view, watching a director's entire filmography is good. Specifically because when I hear you guys talk about the style of a director, when I hear you guys talk about shot sequences or even how someone fucking edits a movie, which is blowing my mind right now, it's because you guys put in the work. It's because you guys sat there and you've watched this director's films and been like, oh my God, this is that guy. Now, if you're not a filmmaker, if you are someone who is casually viewing a movie, I think at this point in Scorsese's filmography, you're like, I'm fucking good. I'll skip to Goodfellas.
Depending on your taste, though.
I think for like a general movie-going audience, because this is not how movies are released. This is not how you're supposed to view
but
movies.
this is how movies are released.
Not weeks
Not
apart.
Not weeks apart.
Not consecutively.
No,
years.
Yeah,
You get
yeah.
years
You-
break,
you
so
get
it feels
time.
a refresher.
Yeah.
So I think like someone who's coming at it from more entertainment sort of point of view, while I'm still trying to learn and still interested in this universe, but also watching these movies for entertainment value because I haven't seen a lot of them, I see the bad in watching just one director's filmography. I see how you can start to get lost in the sauce and certain points don't hit as hard as they should or as they can because you're like, yeah, I fucking saw this. I get it.
Right.
It's got
My
it.
biggest complaint generally in doing this is literally the same feeling I get when I go stir crazy. It's like being locked up. It's like being constrained in a way. And almost like going to school. Reading a book for school, you don't enjoy it as much as when you pull it off the shelf yourself. That idea. Not saying that's true with everybody,
I
but
made
just
a face.
the idea.
I definitely agree with everything that's been said. And I'm just wondering then, does that mean we all subscribe to the idea that every filmmaker is making the same movie over and over? And, you know,
Every artist is.
I was about to say, I don't think that's just a film thing. Musicians, painters, like you have one core thing in your being that you're communicating, and it's you. You are communicating you every time.
Do you think you can name a traditional auteur that maybe masks that better than any other?
I think Scorsese maybe is pretty good at it.
If you're talking about genre and the way that his style has evolved, yeah.
Up to this point,
We're really looking.
I think it's a little more obvious, but I know the next film is a gamble. It might be obvious and might follow this train, but I think After Hours is the first time where it starts to change.
A big shift, yeah.
And I think that there's a lot that follows where it becomes less obvious.
Yeah. It's funny how I think that Kubrick hides the thematic stuff better
definitely.
than most, but I think that his style is so abrasively in your face obvious that it's him, that's where it comes into play more.
Yeah, but he's doing the same thing Scorsese does, hopping around genres.
Frank and I did a weekend where we watched all of Kubrick's films chronologically, the shorts all the way through every feature.
Which we should do again.
But see, filmmakers like him, that's great. Like, that works really well. It just depends on the filmmaker, depends on the movies, and depends on the quantity.
Yeah, that's true.
It really
With
depends
the
on the
shorts,
quantity.
it's
Because
16.
you and I, Frank, were discussing like how Tarkovsky wouldn't necessarily be that difficult week to week, even though like a lot of his movies deal with a lot of the same shit, but he masks a lot of those themes in different
But
genres.
they're also so unmistakably him.
Also so unmistakably
to
him.
a like painful degree sometimes.
Exactly.
Like, please stop monologuing.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
How do you feel about Martin Scorsese thus far in doing him like this?
Well, I think this is the first film where I felt fatigued, and I wondered. I like this less than Taxi Driver and New York, New York, personally.
Yes. I like it less than Taxi Driver.
I just think it's the first time where I was like, all right, they're too similar.
Yeah.
Like, I'm seeing too many similarities. I'm getting a little pulse, but I know After Hours is soon, and I think that'll help a lot.
And I think King of Comedy, in its own very specific way, just by the nature of Rupert Pupkin himself and the actions that he is, or the world that he's living in
Is
and
that
operating
his
in.
fucking name?
Oh, yes. Rupert Pupkin. Exactly. Right there. That shows that there's something a little off. I think thematically and even like as far as the character tropes, they're very similar. But Rupert Pupkin, not Pumpkin. That's very distinct. You can't mistake it for pumpkin. You'll learn in a little bit.
I'm excited now.
Oh, I'm so excited.
His name is Rupert.
Yeah. But I think in the case of Raging Bull, I wouldn't necessarily say I was fatigued, but I think that that's why I even didn't attempt to write plot notes and things, because I was just like, I know where this is going. Like, and we can talk about this in a capacity that I think actually works just as well as running down the plot to be able to attach thoughts to different things. Now, I don't think that I forgot any thought that I meant to say on this podcast in not running down the plot because of the fact that we've been almost conditioned to the way that Scorsese has implemented his themes into his movies.
Yeah,
I think specifically for Raging Bull, just because it is like vignettes in a man's life where it's just like this happens, then they keep bouncing between those two things that happen.
Yeah, there's
different iterations.
You don't.
Of those
the character really doesn't have an arc until after he wins the championship.
Just like Sheeran.
Like it's one note, and then all of a sudden it's like the one note is slowly fading into oblivion.
The Irishman's fun.
No, the Irishman
more fun.
The
than
Irishman
this.
feels fun because
Audience at home, I'm making a really shocked face. The Irishman's fun.
He likes the crime movies. He has fun with those.
Yeah,
It's like I don't realize how terrible Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran.
Frank, I've never done that before until
now
this
twice.
podcast.
Yes.
For shame.
Yeah.
For shame, I'm so sorry, Frank.
Okay. It's okay.
Well, no, you're kind of a bad guy. And dead.
Me?
It's fun, and I don't realize how bad Frank is until like the end. I'm like, oh yeah, you're terrible.
It's because
You get lost in the campiness, and I think it's gonna happen in Goodfellas, and I think it's gonna happen in Casino too.
yes.
I
and
get
The
lost,
Departed.
and I think that's kind of the power of this movie and why I don't hate it.
Scorsese is learning how to make you like his movies. Is what's happening here.
Yes.
He's
And
tailoring himself to your taste slowly.
So far, none of these I think are concerned with that. I think they're almost challenging you to like them.
No, I know.
They're very abrasive.
That's what I'm saying.
And
He's
in your face.
he's putting all the seeds there so that way you'll be able to enjoy those movies even more.
Yes. And I think all those other movies have more things that happen, have more exciting plot points.
Yeah.
Where almost every single movie up to this point has been like character studies. And while that element is present and still in The Irishman and Goodfellas and stuff, it's not the driving force. There are plots that are driving
There's
the
a story
films.
that is being told.
Yes.
You're just in the vehicle of like an unconventional character.
Where for real, I don't think any of these are like that up to this point. And I don't think King of Comedy really is. I think After Hours becomes gags instead of plot, and that's working toward it. I don't know. We'll get there.
I think After Hours is almost literally a vehicle for metaphor. Like, I think if anything, that's his art movie.
Let's
be
be
blunt.
Let's time to be blunt. Does this movie belong in the canon? I'm willing to go first, and I'm going to say yes. I think it does. I think that in the trajectory of his filmography, it's good that we now get a real version of the fictionalized characters that we've been seeing. It's good that we see what a Jimmy Doyle, a Travis Bickle, and one other character whose name I forgot in Mean Streets. Johnny Boy. It's good. I think it is good to see that Scorsese isn't just internalizing his own versions of himself, but that these people are, I was trying to say this and these, I'm sorry, that this person is a reflection of greater society. I think it's more of a message on like what men are as a whole, what do we value as a country, and what do we value as a people to each other.
This is a very deep dissection into toxic masculinity, for sure. And I guess at that point I'll say, originally going into this podcast, I would have probably said no, but in hearing Brandon say yes, and in thinking that I was not really thinking I'd want to watch this movie anytime soon, and I'm not necessarily saying I want to watch it soon, but I'm definitely more inclined to see it again after talking about it today. So if Frank feels comfortable, I feel comfortable inaugurating Raging Bull as well into the Chronic
I
Canon.
feel conflicted.
That's exactly my problem.
Because
Which Scorsese's have we inaugurated at this point?
Mean Streets and Taxi Driver.
Okay.
That's it.
Wait, we didn't do Alice? I thought we did Alice.
I don't think
No,
so.
we did not. I said that that's not a movie I would call a Chronic Canon film.
You're right.
In fact, I think that may have been where we brought up the watching it high.
Yes.
Because that plays into it.
Yes.
Kind of forgot about
Because that was another thing.
forgot about that bit.
I thought being high during this was not as positive on my end. But then thinking about it, I'm like, if anything, I think it crafted an experience.
Yeah.
Because that's why we talked about it the way we did.
My conflict comes from remembering watching it and remembering the same thing that happens in New York in Taxi Driver, where it's the cycle of the same scenes over and over.
Yes.
But for some reason here, I found the repetition less engaging than in those other two. Obviously, I was alone in the New York argument, but I don't know the preference thing.
Yep.
And I just don't like sitting through the scenes of him courting his wife.
Those scenes are so rough.
They're just, I don't know. But
So
they're supposed to
rough.
be rough, and it's art. I don't know. Fuck it. Yeah, we can put it in. I don't give a shit.
Well, see, but I don't like the I don't like
Yeah.
the reluctant throwing it in.
It's important. It is important. It is an important movie. All we've talked about is the importance of it, and we're still trying to figure out how to define this Chronic Canon. If it's personal taste, I'm saying no. If we're trying to define the must-sees, then
for us, our Chronic Canon.
then I would have fought a lot harder for New York. I mean, I know I wouldn't have gotten in, but I wouldn't have outright said no.
I do think, however, if I would not feel comfortable inaugurating any movie that either of you were straight up like, I didn't like it.
Yeah, that's true. That's why I was.
Yeah.
That's,
And I'm sorry that I am the one that had to do it.
no.
To pull a plug on your movie.
But I agreed, and now here I feel more conflicted. Fuck, this is stupid. This is not good podcasting. Fuck, just put it in.
Anyway,
just put it in.
I
I mean, debating
it
on a
is
weird.
in.
All right, yeah, it's. In.
Oh no, it sucks. The Chronic Canon's debating the Chronic Canon on the Chronic Canon. I'm turning this bullshit off. Fuck you.
I quit.
Anyway,
Put it in.
I think that it works in our Chronic Canon simply because
Put it in.
I think when I had tied it into The Irishman, like
Oh,
in my
yeah.
mind, I think that it fits with your lineage that you had mentioned before with
Yes.
talking about. Like, I think that Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, and Raging Bull have all been benchmarks in his filmography that we've reached. Whereas I don't think New York is a movie that, with or without it in his career, you have much change. Not sure.
Do you guys?
What?
You know, it'd be really funny
What's that?
if we get all the way to the Irishman and we don't add it to the Chronic Canon.
I will lose my mind, but I doubt
Talked about
very
it
high.
every
That-
episode.
If that happens,
Yeah.
everybody call the police. It's not
Dude,
us.
honestly, I don't think that'll happen simply by proxy of Al Pacino. His inclusion alone, man. Fucking
And Pesci's return, but that's for a later episode.
fucking fathers.
So it's in the canon. Congratulations,
Raging
Mr.
Bull.
De Niro.
Raging Bull is in the Chronic Canon. Robert De Niro now has 3 films officially in our Chronic Canon.
Yeah, I just made notes.
And Martin
on a-
Scorsese.
on a little
Really?
list. Yeah, joined only by officially Heat.
Oh, hell yeah.
I think that's the only other official movie in the canon.
Well, maybe we should just throw the Irishman in.
Well, I thought it was.
I guess because we're
implied.
doing
We're
it,
not
but
there.
are we doing Heat at some point?
Yeah, but it's already in the canon because
Okay.
it's in our opening statement.
It is. It is part of our mantra. If we do have a religion, it is Heat. So,
I mean, I'm not arguing.
yeah, we abide by De Niro's rules, or Neil Macaulay's rules,
Yeah.
if we're being more specific.
So is De Niro the key to being in the canon?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe.
You gotta be Robert De Niro.
Yeah, and even he fucks up sometimes. But I guess with that, curious to know if you guys have watched anything cool lately.
Well, Frank and I, me being Brandon,
I'm Jesse.
I'm Frank.
took a little trip with our boy Nick, who brings the dank.
Shout out again. Yeah, had a similar experience.
Similar experience. where
Raging
we
Bull and
got-
Sonic. Who would have thought?
Where we got really, really high and we went and saw the Sonic movie.
Yeah.
Started the day pretty nice, playing some Smash, and then Nick came through and we left to go to this movie. And let me tell you, I definitely So Sonic kind of has gone through what I would call like the catch treatment, where the first sort of footage came out and everyone was like, what the fuck? No. But the difference is where Tom Hooper, right?
Yeah.
Tom Hooper for Cats. Tom Hooper saw what everyone was saying, was like, you guys will get it. Whereas the studio or whoever the fuck made the Sonic movie went, oh, okay, got it.
No, but Tom Hooper did go
try.
back after the movie already came out and fixed
They were
He didn't
fixing
fix it.
stuff in the background. They were not fixing
were-
the element.
Oh.
They weren't fixing
I
that.
thought they were
True.
fixing the digital fur technology.
There was no way to fix it.
There's no way to
Remove it.
fix it.
Get
It's
rid
perfect
of it.
as it is. Digital fur technology.
So good.
So,
Jesse.
you know, when this movie first got pitched or came out and we got that little bit of footage, Frank and I were on board simply because we're like, this looks fucking terrible. This
Yep.
is going to be great. This
I
is
was
gonna
ready
be
to go
great.
at midnight.
I will be. Frank literally came up to me and goes, have you seen this Sonic movie? I'll be there at midnight.
Look, I wanted to see the train wreck and I wanted to give my money to it.
So,
But then the internet fucking had to win.
the internet, in one of the rare cases, overtook whatever studio made this movie and made them go back and retrace every goddamn frame of it to make Sonic look better.
Oh yeah.
He looks better.
He does look better.
I mean,
Makes
objectively,
you
he
like
did
the
look
movie
better.
less.
I had, now that when I found out they fixed it, started looking at it like a real movie and was like, this doesn't look any sort of good. This looks like it's going to be bad. So then I went into it with a bit of a what I call a Detective Pikachu mood, which is where I'm like, this won't be good, but I know I'm going to at least try and enjoy it.
And it's for children.
And it's for kids. Got to remember that part. Got to keep that in mind. And I will say, after watching it, if I were 10 and saw this movie, fucking, it would have rocked. It
So
would've
all you
slapped.
10-year-old listeners,
Go watch this movie.
So I only have
Also,
one question. How's Jim Carrey?
He
he's
fucking steals the
wild.
show.
He's
He
fucking wild.
steals.
When does
the-
Jim Carrey not steal the show?
I know.
I mean, I had
I mean, I
my,
think that's by design in Jim Carrey's nature.
I had my doubts because the real life
had
Jim
my
Carrey is losing his mind and the government's trying to kill him.
It's
So,
So?
I was like, how is you? Have you been in movies? I like
No, not
was
really.
confused.
traitor of the brethren, motherfucker.
I'm trying to save you, motherfucker. But he comes in and just smashes it. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm in a fucking Sonic movie in 2020.
It's fun.
Sure.
Hell yeah.
Kills it. Like, not even mad.
There is a spoiler, I guess, if you dance scene in Sonic.
Oh my
That
God.
is one of the craziest things I've ever seen with my eyes.
And it
It's
just
like,
happens.
out of
Most
nowhere.
memorable dance scene since Ex Machina.
Yes, probably.
Ex Machina was also weird.
Yeah,
Weird
and it
movie,
has
but very good
and a
dancing.
very random ass dance scene. I don't. Come on, bro, lay it down. I, honestly, in my like personal awards, I nominate Oscar Isaac that year. I'm 99% sure it's because of that moment.
Yeah, man, that's
Come
up
on,
there.
lay it down. It's like
And he
what
goes ham.
is happening?
great.
Jim Carrey has that energy the whole movie,
Dude.
and then ratchets it up further for that dance scene.
Great.
I was like, what's going on? It is shot insane. The song's insane. He's insane. This is also my pick for the week, I've decided. We're doing a co-pick.
Okay.
But can I also bring up that when we went to the theater way too high, there's literally no one and nothing, and we were very confused
Dude,
what
it
to
was
do.
it was weird. It felt like being in like a dystopian society. Like there was nothing pointing anywhere. There were like kiosks that we thought we
Where
had to
did you
to.
go?
Some imagine, but it was not one that I'd ever been to. and
Interesting.
It looked like a restaurant.
Yeah,
like I
it
don't
looked like
get
a
it.
bar and a restaurant, and we had to go like all the way down the theater to buy snacks and then eventually a ticket. I was about to walk away. I was like, right, can I buy a ticket? Like, where
Yeah.
do I go? There was one worker I saw.
That's crazy.
It was just
What?
like, and no people. There was like 2 other people there.
So you found a Black Lodge.
It felt like it. I was literally like, what the fuck is, I'm too high for this.
Yeah, that's
This is
a
not
lot.
stoner friendly.
I
No.
did not want to say any words, and I had to say a lot.
And
Oh,
we
yeah.
were saying this very loudly.
It's
and,
like,
I
what's
think,
go-
and I think the worker was like, over here.
Yeah.
Come on. After we're like,
They
what
were-
the fuck's going
You know
on?
that gif that goes around from Pulp Fiction where
Travolta.
Travolta's kind of just like looking around.
Yeah.
That was all three of us just like, where the fuck do we go? What is this play?
So it made the movie more fun. It's
Good.
not good, but it's bananas and does a lot of weird shit,
Like
and
it's
it's
fine.
worth seeing.
Like it's fine. As a kid, and like any child will probably like that movie.
Yeah.
And they set up a little sequel that I'd go see it.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of hype. I hope they
Hell
make
yeah.
a sequel.
Cool.
So yeah, it's a good movie.
I never grew up with
go
Sonic
see the
or
Sonic
anything, so-
movie.
That was very Sonic Adventures 2.
You think Sonic is worth seeing in theaters?
Yeah.
What about someone like me?
I mean, like, take your fucking niece to your nephew or something.
Would you recommend I go see it in theaters?
Not you, no.
Okay, we'll see.
know.
You said
Well,
go see it.
So if you listen to this podcast and go, that Jesse guy, I'm like him. Don't go see Sonic.
Yeah.
Everyone else go see Sonic.
It'll be nice. Go see, take a child to a movie.
Nice.
You should see it not in theaters.
Okay. There's on my own time.
Everybody else, same thing goes for you.
Cool.
Just like, you would be mad that you were sitting in the theater. You'd be like, why did I do
One
this?
of those movies where I look to you and go, let's leave.
Yes.
Let's go.
And if we were watching at home, you'd go, oh, this is fun.
Yeah. I think it's funny that doesn't seem to happen often, but it's happened enough times that it's become a thing.
I can only think of
the
Ad
Let's
Astra
Leave.
and Valerian.
Well, and Battle Los Angeles, but I don't think you were there.
I wasn't there for that.
There's probably more. Jack and Jill, I left.
Oh, yeah.
The
What's your
Valerian one is making me laugh.
Yeah,
The Valerian experience was rough. My pick is also a new release. It is The Invisible Man.
Oh, nice.
The reboot, if you will, of Universal's classic horror monster property. But it
Dark
takes
universe.
it takes HG. Well, see, I don't know if this is a dark universe movie.
I still like the idea.
Dark universe?
But I think that I think that this is a. Do you know what the dark universe is?
I'm assuming it's Conjuring and Insidious?
Listen, so pause. This is actually, if anything, the franchise that I wish existed because it's right up my alley, if anything. They being Universal Studios, take their properties of the Universal horror monsters of the 30s, 40s, even 20s, like Phantom of the Opera, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman, Invisible Man,
Dracula.
like Dracula, all those classic movie monsters.
Black Lagoon.
Yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Reboot them into new, dark, gritty horror monster movies
That would
all be in a franchise series in which they're all tied together, and inevitably they'd have an Avengers style movie.
Monster
Probably.
Squad.
Yeah,
Monster
basically.
Squad
Yeah,
2.
Or Van Helsing.
Monster Squad was the best version of that could have ever existed, I think.
I just think that would be a great culmination.
Oh, absolutely. A modern Monster Squad? I wonder how they could
Look
do
at all
that.
these terrible
That might be a prime for
R-rated
Stranger Things.
Yeah.
R-rated
Oh,
horror
fuck.
movies that we will now turn into a PG-13 children's action movie.
If Stranger
Fat
Things
Kid.
brought in the fucking classic
name's
Universal
Horace.
monsters, I'd be all in.
They're-
But anyway, so they made one movie, and that, well, actually, I believe they might have made a couple. No, they made like,
They made a bunch
oh, but I don't know.
in the early 2000s.
Because like, was the Wolfman one of them, or was that right before?
Yeah.
Because I think that might have been off the heels. Because Benicio del Toro, I don't know if he was in the slate. Because there was like Johnny Depp, Anthony Hopkins, Tom Cruise. Like there were a bunch of people that were supposed to be in these movies. But the one that I can specifically remember, and I know it's the movie that tanked the entire thing, was The Mummy. And I'm pretty sure it was the first movie in the Dark Universe.
Like the Brendan Fraser
No,
movie?
the Tom Cruise one that you've probably never heard of because it bombed that bad. Think about that. A modern blockbuster starring Tom Cruise that came out within the last 10 years. You heard of it?
No.
Does that surprise you?
The only mummy movies I could think of are Brendan Fraser and then The Scorpion King with The Rock.
Yeah, I'm talking about The Mummy that came out like literally a couple years ago.
That's
Has
the-
nothing to do with those.
Wait, that mummy?
Yeah, with Tom Cruise.
I don't know any of the details, but I think I know what you're talking about
Yeah,
now.
but
that
see,
it's
the
more
fact that
recent.
you don't know what I'm talking about really goes to show that this movie was apparently a garbage fire on its own, but didn't do well anyway outside of that. And they canned the whole idea of doing a dark universe and abandoned all other projects. Now, this is the first time Universal has made another movie using any of those properties, as far as I understand. Could be wrong. Correct me at the email, thechroniccanon@gmail.com, if you want to accost me. Feel free to. The Invisible Man, Lee Winnell, the writer of the original Saw and Insidious series, who directed one of the worst movies I've ever seen, Insidious Chapter 3. Terrible. Awful movie.
It does suck.
It's
I never saw that
atrocious.
one.
It is a literal garbage fire.
Second one's great.
Second one was great, from what I remember. I haven't seen it since the day that we saw it, back when it came out, so I might want to keep the memory and not go back. But anyway, this version, I think, was one of the most creative and interesting ways that they could have taken the original source material that H.G. Wells had written and adapted it for a modern audience. And I think not just that, but just taking the base concept of an invisible man and applying it to how can we incorporate that into a thrilling and frightening narrative. And the way that they frame it in this particular version is incredibly timely and also incredibly important. And I think it will spark lots of discussions across many different spectrums, not just on the subject of horror, but also on the subject of misogyny and the subject of gaslighting and how women have been systematically abused and treated by men across the world, and they turn it into a genre movie. Now, granted, I think that the one problem I had with the movie, like the biggest issue, was that at least while I was watching it, the movie seemed to struggle with choosing whether or not it wanted to be the serious prestige horror thriller or the genre movie that's kind of a little crazy and off the rails and unbelievable and unrealistic. Jumps back and forth between those two things. However, I still think regardless of all that, it is a thrilling theater experience, holds one of the most surprising moments I've seen in any movie in the past couple of years, at least in theaters. Elizabeth Moss gives an incredible performance. And I think that as far as studio Hollywood movies, there is more going on with the camera and the technical elements than you would see in any traditional Hollywood studio movie, especially a horror film. Like, the use of wide angles in the movie is so great, given that it's like, think about it, an invisible man. You can't see him, but theoretically he can do things, right? So you expand that frame nice and wide, you can look around.
Right.
Your eyes are immediately paranoid, immediately searching the frame. Yeah. Where is he? What the fuck's going on? Even if he's not there.
Yo, just like her.
Yeah.
Let's go
shit.
right now.
It's great. I'd honestly see it again, just discussing it right now, because I'm like, you know what? I think I'm bound to like this more the second time I see it, because no matter what, the concept, genius. Like, literally, how they thought of it, don't know. It's Lee Winnell. He literally is the only writer, which is awesome. I think that it's incredible for him. And I also think it's great that, given the movie comes from this female perspective, and such a distinctly female perspective, Lee Winnell gave the script to Elizabeth Moss prior to filming and was like, clean this up. Make this correct, please.
I know I definitely got some things wrong about the female experience.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah. I mean, hey, good on him.
You always should.
But regardless of any issues I might have had with it, definitely a movie that is worth seeing because you will talk about it.
Cool.
No question.
Dope.
I forgot one thing that I compulsively need to mention, and then I think I'll be good.
Cool.
Budget and box office.
Oh, for Raging Bull.
Raging Bull.
Yeah, we're winding the clock's back.
Yep. I saw
movie.
the tab, and I was like, shit, gotta do it. I'll be mad if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
$18 million budget, which today is $56.3 million.
Less than the last one, right?
Less than the last one, still pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the return of Scorsese, like his last chance, because New York wasn't good, but you got Prestige De Niro, boxing movie, Rocky's popular, cool, we'll give you the money.
Mm-hmm.
It made $23.4 million, which today is $73.2. So a hit, a mild hit, not really a big hit, made money, but was a huge critical film. 8 nominations at the Oscars, 2 wins for Bobby D and Thelma. Thank you. That is all.
Hell yeah. Well, again, I'm Jesse.
I'm Frank.
Brandon, signing off.
And we can't thank you enough for listening to this episode of The Chronic Canon. Again, if you're a first-time listener, thank you for joining us for the first time.
Weird episode. I'm so sorry.
Weird episode, no doubt, but hopefully one that you enjoyed to some degree if you're still listening. And our email is thechroniccanon@gmail.com. If you have any questions, concerns, recommendations, any sponsorship things, and I don't care, whatever you want, send us anything. It's fine.
Please just email us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Nothing harmful.
Yeah, please don't threaten me.
I mean, I'd prefer if you didn't. Yeah.
Anybody.
It's great.
Don't do that.
But on that note, this is The Chronic Canon. Signing off.